Picture this. It's Tuesday morning and you are watching all your favorite fantasy football YouTubers' waiver wire videos, but you realize that all their top targets are already at the end of your bench. In today's video, we are bringing you 10 plus stashes that you need to be having on the end of your bench that have high priority and high upside to help you leverage and win future weeks. Starting it off with these guys over here. These guys should already be rostered. I know some of these guys, you're going to say, Caleb, these guys have been rostered for weeks. Just depends on your league side. So I want to make sure that you guys have these guys rostered onto your team. But when we bring up our actual stashes for the week, the first guy we're going to be talking about, it's going to be Emanuel Wilson for the Green Bay Packers. And the part that I want to highlight with Emanuel Wilson is, of course, he's behind Josh Jacobs. So there's no way that Emanuel Wilson, when we're looking at this guy the last few weeks, hasn't been a super high snap share. But in week 3 versus Tennessee, did have 16.5 fantasy points, had a 41% snap share. He did catch a receiving touchdown, especially later in the game. So you're going to say to me, well, Caleb, there's no way Emanuel Wilson's going to be beating out Josh Jacobs. And while I 100% agree with you, there's absolutely no way that Emanuel Wilson is beating out Josh Jacobs. We have seen these high priority handcuffs at the end of your bench provide some pretty good value. And I would put Emanuel Wilson as a team with the Green Bay Packers. I know a lot of people are worried about Marshawn Lloyd coming back a little bit later into the season, but I think right now you have to have Emanuel Wilson stashed at the end of your bench, because if for some reason anything were to happen to Josh Jacobs, not that we're saying that all the running back stashes can't have standalone value, because we saw in previous weeks a guy like a Braylon Allen, it's a lot more running back by committee than it has in the previous years. I think Emanuel Wilson can have some value going forward, so just wanted to put him as my first waiver wire stash you need to have in week 5. My next guy is going to be Xavier Legette, and listen, I know he was like the hype of everyone's waiver wire video, that all the talk of the town, but some of these leagues I'm even in, I saw Xavier Legette get picked up, but also dropped here recently. He's 50% rostered on sleeper leagues, so I just wanted to bring him up that in case you're in one of those 1 out of 2 leagues where Xavier Legette still isn't stashed at the end of the bench, make sure Xavier Legette's stashed. 19.6 fantasy points this last week, 87% snap share, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 1 total touchdown. And the part is, Andy Dalton is absolutely cooking with this offense. Deontay Johnson's looking good. And as much as Adam Thielen has looked good in previous years, Xavier Legette was drafted with first round draft pedigree in the NFL draft. So you absolutely have to be considering a little bit of Xavier Legette as a late round stash. Go get some Xavier Legette. The next player we're going to be talking about, it's going to be Tai Chandler for the Minnesota Vikings. And another player that we're talking about kind of being stuck in a handcuff role to an elite level RB like an Aaron Jones. And so when we're looking at Aaron Jones, I mean, over these last few weeks, Aaron Jones, by no stretch of the imagination, 55, 61, 60, and 82% snap share. When we're looking at Tai Chandler with a 35, 35, 35, 12% snap share and really not scoring any more than 8 fantasy points, Caleb, you're like, what? This doesn't feel like a great level stash. Well, the thing that I want to remember with Tai Chandler is not only have we seen Aaron Jones not be the most durable running back, knock on wood, I have plenty of Aaron Jones, but let's just be realistic here, guys. 2023 only played 11 games, 2022 played in 17, 15 in 2021, 14 in 2020, 16 in 2019, 12 and 12 in 2018 and 2017. So he does play in a lot, but there are games where he does miss. And when we look at Tai Chandler last year, when the way that he was able to come in for Alexander Madison, like week 10 had 10 fantasy points, 15 fantasy points in week 11, and 24 fantasy points in week 15. So Tai Chandler, if he gets the volume, if he gets the opportunity, high-end upside at the end of your bench. So make sure you are stashing and taking a look at Tai Chandler. The next running back we're going to talk about is Tyrone Tracy for the New York Giants, drafted rookie out of the University of Purdue, 5'11", 210, and he's only rostered in 12% of leagues. So a lot less than a guy like an Emanuel Wilson, who is rostered in 22%. Tai Chandler's rostered in 37%. Tyrone Tracy is pretty much out there for the taking, and Tyrone Tracy looked good in preseason. And I understand he didn't get the draft capital that everyone expects, but really right now, Tyrone Tracy, he has had limited production. So I 100% hear you. I mean, when we're looking at the Giants running back depth chart, it's Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy, Eric Gray. The part that I want to highlight about Devin Singletary is I've talked about Devin Singletary just being a jag, which is just another guy. Honestly, in week 2 and week 3 versus Washington and Cleveland, Devin Singletary, 14 fantasy points, 18 fantasy points, had a ton of yards per carry, looked good, 70, 79% snap share. Last 2 weeks has been around 68, but Tyrone Tracy is still only getting that 31 to 25% snap share. So you're going to say to me, well, Caleb, where's the overall upside? I came to the stash video. I'm going to say this. Tyrone Tracy did look super explosive in the preseason, and based on his profile, I think if he were to get extended run for the New York Giants, yes, it's not the Philadelphia Eagles, not some elite level offense by any stretch of the imagination. I do think Tyrone Tracy has the upside to be able to be a really great stash. The next stash that we're going to be talking about is going to be Isaac Guerendo for the San Francisco 49ers. This guy's rostered in 5% of leagues, and I understand why. 0, 0, 1.9, -2 fantasy points, over the last 4 weeks. But the thing that we do know is that he is pretty much the clear backup running back for the San Francisco 49ers team right now behind Jordan Mason. The likelihood of Christian McCaffrey coming back within the next 4 weeks is going to be super slim. So if you have Jordan Mason, you 100% need to be having Isaac, who ran a super fast 40-yard dash time out of the University of Louisville. So it's not like he was drafted with high-end draft capital, but we have seen guys like an Elijah Mitchell come in spurts for the San Francisco 49ers, where if you have a running back and you're breathing, you have some sort of fantasy football value. So 100% be stashing Isaac, especially if you need you're in a deeper league and or need some running back depth and these other guys aren't available ahead of him. The next guy I want to talk about stashing, it's going to be Jerry Jeudy. And you might say to me, Caleb, Jerry Judy's a household name. He shouldn't be on this list. And I understand. I think that could be debated. But if we're looking at Jerry Jeudy overall, right now he's only rostered in 66% of leagues. So I wanted to bring him up. I know he's rostered in more leagues, and like my cutoff for a stash video is 50%. But the reason I wanted to bring him up is his snap share has been super great, and the targets, 8, 6, 7, 9 targets. So even if we're here and we're talking about stashes and you play in a super shallow league, Jerry Jeudy needs to be added. Now, like I said, you're going to say to me, well, Caleb, I don't think Jerry Judy's a stash. And I hear you. There's value to be had with Jerry Jeudy not being a stash. I just added him to this video because I did want to provide a guy that I definitely like. And if he's not a stash, go trade for him on the cheap. I mean, he's at the end of someone's bench waiting to be absolutely unleashed coming up. The next guy we're going to be talking about is Jordan Whittington for the Rams. And Jordan Whittington was a stash pretty much the last 2 weeks for me, but got his run versus Chicago Bears with no Puka, with no Cooper Kupp, 97% snap share, 12.2 fantasy points, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 62 yards. And Jordan Whittington looked super explosive coming out of the University of Texas in the preseason for the Rams. We loved what we were seeing, and he kind of stepped right into that little bit of miniature Puka. Now, Kupp, his status is uncertain for week 5 and going into week 6. So you're like, well, Caleb, how can these Rams wide receivers post Puka really develop? The thing for me is Jordan Whittington, if we're looking at the overall depth chart, he is playing in the same spot that Cooper Kupp does. So the value on him might be a little bit lower than a Jerry Jeudy or some of these other stashes. So I do want to just highlight that for you. But if you are super desperate with the buys, if you want some upside, I do think if Jordan Whittington has another week where he produces, Sean McVay loves to get his weapons involved. And I do think they found a late round gem here with Jordan Whittington. So I would be looking at stashing some Jordan Whittington. The next guy that I want to talk about and highlight as a stash, and like I said, I think we're kind of getting to the point in the season where a lot of you are like, some of these guys aren't stashes. It is going to be Tucker Kraft. He is rostered in 53% of leagues. He is the number 11 tight end. So you're trying to say to me, okay, what the heck? Like, why? I can't stash Tucker Kraft. He's already taken. Okay, cool. But 17.3 fantasy points, 86% snap share, 9 total targets, 6 receptions, 53 yards. I understand Jaden Reed, Dontavion Wicks, but Tucker Kraft is stepping up as the clear one over Luke Musgrave. They both drafted in the same draft. Luke Musgrave actually got the better draft capital over Tucker Kraft. So give me some Tucker Kraft as a late round stash if I need some tight end help. And just continuing on this tight end discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about Taysom Hill for the New Orleans Saints. And Taysom Hill, if we look over the last 2 years, has not finished anywhere lower than a tight end 12 on a points per game basis. Now, this year, he is the tight end 22. He is only rostered in 34% of leagues because he's had 4 fantasy points, 2 fantasy points, but last week he did have 14 fantasy points. Now, the point that I do want to talk about is Taysom Hill. He does have a bruised lung and a bruised rib. Now, we should continue to monitor his status here with Taysom Hill. So me telling you to go stash Taysom Hill when you have a guy that's injured, understand. Maybe this is someone that you'd look at in the waiver wire because he's not probably going to play this week in week 5 versus Kansas City. But he does have a ton of rushing upside going forward. So I would continue to take a look at Taysom Hill as a guy that you potentially need to be stashing. And my last and final stash is going to be Eric All for the Bengals. And Eric, goodness gracious, I think the more we look at Eric All, the more I'm liking what I'm seeing. Eric All was injured coming out of the University of Iowa, got drafted in the 4th round, probably should have been a top 2 round draft pick just based on talent, but that injury definitely scared a lot of people off. But 6.8 fantasy points last week. In week 3, he had 6.2, 7.2 the week before that, 52, 34, 60% snap share. So he is getting on the field and he had 4 targets in each of those games. Now you're going to say 4 targets, that's not a ton of volume for a tight end, but let's be clear. Some of y'all would be cheering if you got 6 fantasy points out of your tight end spot. So I think Eric All, he's only rostered in 5% of leagues. This is 100% a deeper level stash that you definitely want to be taking advantage of going forward. But like I said, if somehow, I know these guys were talked about earlier in the video, but if Jalen Polk or Trey Tucker is going to be out there on the waiver wire, those guys need to be already stashed. But I do think both those guys have high-end upside coming into the next few weeks, especially with no Devontae Adams for the Raiders potentially in a trade. So if you like fantasy football, if you like winning, I'm answering every question down below. So I want you here in the community. Hit that like and subscribe button. Helps me out so much. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.